Hello, I'm Sharon and this is The Lifelong Learner, and today I am going to be telling you what's on my bookshelf, non-fiction edition. So I am on a mission to read every single book that I own. At the minute it is around the 200 mark, so I have about 200 unread books, which can feel a little bit overwhelming at times. However, whenever I think about my books that I have to read in terms of genre, it feels slightly more accessible. So today we're going to see how many non-fiction books I have to read. First up, history and politics. This is Mad, Bad and Sad, A History of Women and the Mind Doctors from 1800 to the present. And this was longlisted for the BBC4 Samuel Johnson Prize for Non-Fiction. I've had this one for a good number of years now, and I think the main reason I haven't read it yet is because of the size. It is a chunker. But I think the topic itself is of huge interest of me because it's kind of that crossover of history, psychology and women's studies, I suppose, and all three of those kind of interest me. I did a psychology degree and one of my modules was in forensic psychology and counselling, and a huge part of that module centred around looking at these labels of mad, bad and sad, and I think it's particularly interesting to look at that in relation to women in history, so I'm looking forward to this one whenever I feel like a chunky read. The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs. I mean, dinosaurs are pretty cool, what more do I need to say? The Classical World, An Epic History of Greece and Rome. I did actually start this because there is a bookmark in it, and I think the reason I started this is because I was considering going on holiday to Greece, and then that didn't happen, so then I think I didn't continue with it. This is another chunky one, so I feel like I'll probably wait till I do eventually go to Greece or Rome. I just need to go on holiday basically to read this one. Black Tudors, The Untold Story. This one is one that I'm really keen to read. I'm kind of just waiting for the right moment. I think it's really interesting to see a sort of history book where it's not just super whitewashed, I suppose, so I'm really keen to get to this history book. I think it's going to be amazing. Divided, Why We're Living in an Age of Walls. This is by Tim Marshall, who wrote Prisoners of Geography, which I have also read and loved. So he tends to write sort of about geopolitics. In this particular book, it's about why we're divided, so it's looking at things like the Great Firewall of China, Trump's idea that he wanted a big wall built, all those sorts of things. So I think it'll make for a really interesting read. Viking Britain, this is just an area of history that I would have a particular area of interest in, so I'm excited to read about some Vikings when I get to this one. How Gay Culture Liberated the Modern World. This is a book that I feel like every Pride month that comes around, I always think, oh, I'll read this, and then I somehow never get to it. Probably again because it's a big chunky one and I really have to be in the mood for chunky books, but I think this will be a fantastic book looking at gay culture and its impact on the world. The Colour of Time. This is heavy. A New History of the World, 1850 to 1960. This is sort of more one of those books that I get that I don't necessarily plan on reading cover to cover. It's kind of like a coffee table type book. Basically, it consists of photographs from history that would have been black and white, but they've been coloured, and obviously it contains a lot of text in relation to what's going on in the photographs. And you know, I think that it's kind of presenting history in a far more vivid way, but I don't know that I'll ever just sit down and read this cover to cover, so it's hard to know whether I consider this on my to-read list or not. It's more of the kind of book that I will flick through. Another coffee table book. This is Pride, the Story of the LGBTQ Equality Movement by Matthew Todd. I have flicked through this on occasion, but I would quite like to read it from cover to cover at some point. So yeah, essentially it is just looking at the history of the LGBTQ community, and it's really sort of comprehensive, and it's got plenty of photographs and things with it. It's a really beautiful book, one that I quite like having as a coffee table book, but like I say, I would quite like to read this in full as well. Next up is Memoir, and I've only got one book to read on this shelf, All You Can Ever Know, A Memoir of Adoption. And this tells the story of Nicole, who is basically adopted, grows up in America, and she's a Korean child, and she's kind of stands out as being different. And all her life she's been told the same story of why she was adopted, and then she starts to question this. And what ensues is a sort of surprising and dark, unsettling sort of story as to why she was actually adopted. So I'm intrigued to see what the reality of her story is. Next up is nature writing, and again I've only got one book to read in this shelf, which is Feral, Rewilding the Land, Sea and Human Life. I absolutely love the cover for this one. It's kind of shown that sort of concrete jungle that we live in, but it's got a deer in it, which is kind of this sort of contrasting image. This is one of those books that doesn't really have a synopsis on it, so I don't know a huge amount about it other than that it's kind of looking at the landscape and the natural world. And I think really this was probably a cover buy for me, but I have also heard quite good things about it. Next up is travel writing, and once again I've only got one book on the shelf, and that book is Lost Japan, Last Glimpse of Beautiful Japan. So I'm quite interested in reading about Japan, so I picked this up as a result. However, Matt over at MCS Books, who isn't making videos at the minute, but I remember he read this and he didn't like it, and I think it probably put me off it a bit. But I'll read it eventually, and maybe I won't agree with them, or maybe I will. I guess we just have to wait and see. Next up is philosophy, and again, I've only got one book on the shelf, and that is A Little History of Philosophy. There's quite a few books in this series. You know, there's a little history of art, literature, all sorts of things, and I am drawn towards philosophy. I simultaneously do not like it, but have always been described as a I've always been described as a philosophical person. So I kind of flip between being interested in it and being frustrated by it. I think I'm always interested in it, but I can be frustrated by it. I think that this will probably be quite accessible and might sort of introduce me to sort of some philosophers or philosophies that are of particular interest to me, and then if I do get interested in it, then I can explore it more in depth. So that's this one. Next up is essays, and once again I've only got one book on the shelf, and the book is Against Everything by Mark Grief. I think the title of this kind of sold it to me, the idea of reading a book that contains essays that are going to be controversial appeals to me. Might not be controversial, but I feel like the title makes me think that it might be controversial. So I don't really know what the content is in this book necessarily, and I kind of want to leave it as a surprise as well. Next up is Spirituality and Religion, and I've got two books on the shelf. First of all, we've got this one, which is Buddhism, Plain and Simple. I've got a couple of sort of religious books, and I kind of have an interest in religion sort of from a sort of academic or historical point of view. I'm not a religious person. I don't really like religion, but I find it interesting. And Buddhism, I think, is kind of filtered into kind of the Western world, and I would be interested in kind of learning a little bit more about it, particularly because of sort of mindfulness being a huge thing that has been adopted by the West in recent years. I would quite like to read the roots of where that comes from. So that's why I got this, and it looks really accessible, and it's nice and short as well. On a slightly different note, we've also got the Satanic Bible. I feel like a lot of people kind of go through that phase, rebellious phase, where you suddenly feel attracted towards this kind of creepy black book that's called the Satanic Bible. I mean, I don't know. I've never read it. I feel like it's probably a load of nonsense, but I'll read it at some point. I think my teenage self probably would have loved it. But I'll have a look at it just to see what it says. I'm sure that there'll probably be some stuff I agree with and some stuff I don't agree with, but I feel like, yeah, like I said, I'm kind of interested in religion, spirituality in general from a more sort of objective standpoint, I guess, as much as possible. So I'm intrigued to see what is in here. Is it a load of nonsense, or is there something of value in here? Who knows? I'll read it one day. Next up, we've got psychology, self-helpy, sciencey books. Out of all non-fiction, psychology books are probably my biggest area of interest, which is why I've got more in this section. First up, we have got Psychedelic Revolutionaries. I have read a couple of books and have a couple of other books that are similar to this to read, and it's all about looking at psychedelics in relation to mental health. It's a particular sort of area of research that I'm particularly interested in. There's a lot of research going on at the minute. I'm not sure how up to date this will be in terms of the research that's been going on, but I think that it's a particularly interesting area of psychology to see what are the impacts of these drugs on the mind and the body. So yeah, that is that one. Next up is A Very Human Ending, How Suicide Haunts Our Species. This is a proof copy that I haven't got round to reading. It came out in 2018, so it is a little bit old now. I feel like it's just one of those books you have to be in the right kind of frame of mind to read about suicide, so that's probably why I haven't read it yet. But I'll get to it. Next up is one I'm particularly excited for. This is Madness Explained, Psychosis and Human Nature. It is a big one. I feel like I did start this at one point but wasn't really in the right frame of mind to concentrate, and I kind of want to leave it for a time when I can feel like I can give it my full attention. So I'm really, really looking forward to this. It also won the British Psychological Society Book Award in 2004. So I think this will be a really sort of comprehensive look at psychosis and what madness is exactly. So that's that one. Next up is Against Empathy, The Case for Rational Compassion. I probably was drawn to this for the title. I am quite an empathetic person a lot of the time and can be quite sensitive, and I feel like I'm interested to know what the alternative view on empathy is, because I think a lot of the time it's kind of looked at. Do you know what, actually? I feel like a lot of time in life actually empathy isn't regarded as a good thing, now that I think about it. Anyway, I'll be interested to see what the perspective of empathy is in this book. The Inflamed Mind by Edward Bullmore. This is basically looking at depression and what depression is. Toxic Childhood Stress, The Legacy of Early Trauma and How to Heal. I'm particularly interested in trauma and how that can affect a person, so I think that this is going to offer good insight into the sort of trauma that can occur in childhood and how that can impact a person. Reaching Down the Rabbit Hole, Extraordinary Journeys into the Human Brain. I love the cover of this, love the title of it. It's got a kind of Alice in Wonderland theme, which is something that I love. This is going to be a bit more sort of neuroscience-y. I'm particularly interested in sort of the brain and the mind and how it works and the kind of biological and neuroscience aspects of that. And I think that this is going to tell a lot about lots of sort of interesting things that go on in the brain and why that they happen. Next is Notes on Suicide. This is a Fitzcarraldo edition, very, very small in size. Similarly to the one from earlier, which is A Very Human Ending, I feel like you have to kind of be in the right frame of mind to read about suicide, so it's not one that I ever naturally kind of gravitate towards, but I will get to it eventually, especially as it's so short, and I do like a short book. Next up is Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung. Carl Jung is, pretty famous in the field of psychology. To me, Freud talked a load of nonsense, but I feel like what Carl Jung said, I feel like I gravitate more towards his ideas, so I'm quite keen to read a lot of his works. I have read his memoir, which is brilliant, so I'm hoping that I'm going to enjoy this one just as much. I also have a slightly smaller Carl Jung book, which is The Undiscovered Self. Very, very short in size. I think I did give this a go at one point as well, but I'll need to kind of get back to it because I don't really remember it. I never finished it. I got to page 35. So I'll start it from scratch, but yeah. That's that one. Next up is Magic Medicine, Modern Day Use of Psychedelic Plants and Substances. So this is looking at sort of the history of magic medicine, or whatever you want to call it. So again, this is a particular area of research that I'm interested in, and I love this little book. It's a little hardback book. Very, very nice. Psychedelics again, these are going to think I've got some kind of problem, but I just find it very interesting on how psychedelics can impact the brain and the mind and its sort of influence in terms of healthcare. So this is Psychedelic Medicine, The Healing Powers of LSD, MDMA, Psilocybin, and I don't know that one actually, Ahusaka. So yeah, I'll not go into any more detail because we're kind of getting the gist. Next up, we've got The Drama of Being a Child by Alice Miller. This is essentially looking at childhood and the kind of, I guess, the difficulties that you go through being a child, and the author has extensive knowledge on this. When I read fiction, I really, really love books that kind of centre around childhood and things from a child's perspective. So it'd be interesting to read a sort of non-fiction book that is looking at the experience of being a child. This is True Hallucinations by Terence McKenna. I'll not go into any more detail, I'm just interested. Next up, we've got Shrinking Violets, The Secret Life of Shyness. As a particularly shy person, I would like to read about it, see what it says about it. Next up is One Way or Another by Adam Phillips. This is a series of essays, so technically this could be on my essay shelf, but Adam Phillips is a psychoanalyst, and basically this is kind of an introduction to his profession and his various perspectives on his experiences of being a psychoanalyst, and he's investigating various different subjects in these essays. Next up we've got On Becoming a Person. So this is Carl Rogers' book, which is his view of psychotherapy. So I have an interest in therapy. Again, I come from a sort of psychology background in terms of I studied it and I work in mental health, so that's why I've got this. What we cannot know, from consciousness to the cosmos to the cutting edge of science explained. I think that I'm just drawn to this because it just feels like it's going to fill me with lots of different bits and pieces of knowledge. So it's like, is the universe infinite? Do we know what happened before the Big Bang? And where is human consciousness located in the brain? So if it's going to answer those questions, I'm here for it. It is time and how we spend it. This is a proof copy that is looking at it from a cultural point of view, psychology point of view, economics, that sort of thing. And I suppose I expect it's going to look at things like wasting time, procrastination. I will get to this at some point, along with the rest of them. What dementia teaches us about love. So this is looking at dementia. I used to work in dementia, and it's an interesting kind of client group to work with, and I think I would be drawn towards kind of reading more about it to understand the disease more, because it can be really, really awful. But there's a lot of kind of fun and more lighthearted experiences I had working in that area, and I quite like the title of this, and I think that it'll probably offer some interesting insights into dementia, so that's that one. Good Reasons for Bad Feelings. Insights from the Frontier of Evolutionary Psychiatry. So this is basically looking at sort of various different sort of mental health diagnoses like anxiety, depression, and it's looking at it from an evolutionary perspective. So essentially it's kind of understanding, what is the purpose of these sort of experiences of depression and anxiety, is the sense that there might actually be a positive purpose for these things. So I'm really interested to see what this author has to say about that. So there you go. That is all the non-fiction books I have on my shelf to read. It's still quite a lot, but if you compared it to the fiction that I have to read, it's absolutely nothing in comparison. If I was to make a video on all the fiction I have to read, that would be a feature film with the sort of director's cut, to be honest. And I'd love to know if you've read any of the books, have any thoughts on any of the books, tell me which ones I should get to first, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.